Hello, this is Talking Books with a Difference. We're at the Sable Camp at Maasai Mara Game Reserve adjacent to the Kruger National Park. We are here for the launch of a book of exquisite wildlife photography and captivating text by Gerald, Hinde and Will Taylor. The book is called The Big Seven, Adventures in Search of Africa's Iconic Species. And I'm going to talk to both of these men during the course of this program, so stay tuned. This beautiful private game reserve is the oldest in South Africa and lies between the Sabi Sands Game Reserve and the Kruger National Park, with which it shares a 19-kilometre open border. It offers incredible game viewing and is popular among well-heeled international tourists and wildlife photographers like Gerald and Will. In one of the largest land lease distribution deals in South Africa, Maasai Mara is now owned by close to 1,000 families of the Mhlanganisweni community. Many community members work at the reserve, which is run by the Maasai Mara Game Reserve. We were part of a select media contingent to attend the launch of this gorgeous book. Gerald, tell me a little bit about your history with Maasai Mara.
It started in 1991, as a matter of fact. I was in the motor business. We had a family business with a Toyota franchise. And we happened to sell the business in October 1989. I was busy working on a leopard book. And the property where I was busy working on said that I was welcome as a guest, but now that I was professional as a photographer, they didn't want me to complete the book on their property. Long story short, I contacted Mr. Rattray and he said I must come along and meet William, who was the head game ranger at Maasai Mara at the time. And he took me around and as a motor car salesman to a bush guy, well, all right, I had been pretty involved in the bush through my period since I was 9 years old. But I still thought, well, by the time they interviewed me, I don't think they're going to let me work at Maasai Mara. Anyway, I got a phone call back when I got home and said, you're welcome to come and stay at Maasai Mara for as long as it takes for you to finish the book, free of charge.
Wow. But tell me where you lived. Apparently it was called the Oven?
We lived in the Oven, yes, my wife and I. And we look back at that as probably the happiest 7 months of our lives. My wife is not really a bushy person. She likes to go to the mall and things like that. But she certainly looked at that as a wonderful 7 months, and so did I. And in the 7 months, while I worked on Leopard Show, we used to go at about 4 o'clock in the morning, so it was pretty early morning starts, and we had carte blanche to stay out all night if need be. I identified 45 different leopards on this property in 7 months, not on the property itself because the animals pass through and they have cubs and so forth and so forth. So it is generally it's a special area for leopards, and it was a special area for me to finish my leopard book. So that was my introduction. If it wasn't for Maasai Mara, I think my professional career as a wildlife photographer wouldn't have taken off at all.
Well, you have quite a long history with Maasai Mara. Tell me a little bit about that, how it started and how it got you where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So my background is as an academic zoologist. So I had finished my master's degree at the University of Natal, and was getting a little bit tired of symposiums and lecture theatres and not getting into the bush as much as I was used to. And I applied to Maasai Mara, which has a little bit of a history with the University of Natal too. There's quite a few ranges that come from that part of the world. And I got the job and came out here, and about four months after I'd been here, I became senior ranger, and then was responsible for the whole ranger operation and training of new rangers and taking out guests, and that was in '89, I think, and that's how it started. And then ever since then, the trajectory of my career has taken me, luckily, to a place where I was able to come back here virtually every year. And so solidly for the last over 20 years, I've been coming back to Mala Mala.
So you're bringing tour groups here now?
I do. I own a tour company, and we don't bring people as much as we send quite a few people, but every opportunity I get, I'm here.
So tell me about your photography. You also took some photographs in the book.
Yes.
When did you get into photography, and what does it mean to you?
I started when I was doing my master's thesis on owls. I was working on spotted eagle owls and wood owls, and I had to take pictures of nestlings and nest sites and various things like that. And I was very unpracticed and very amateurish, and I had actually, I'll tell you a quick story, but had a camera from the zoology department, and I went out and I found a grass owl nest, which is a very unusual nest to find, and over a period of 2 months I took pictures of the fledglings as they grew their wings and everything. And when I went to develop the film, I found out that there was no film in the camera. So that was my start. Once I started at Mala Mala, obviously the opportunities here are unbelievable, and you see things that you just don't see anywhere else, and particularly leopards. We were having amazing sightings of leopards, and so I got myself a really small starter kit camera. And started taking shots. And then when Gerald arrived and we started working together on the leopard, he was very kindly gave me a camera, one of his old cameras, and I started working on it from there, and then just developed over the years. And with the opportunities I've been afforded to be in all various different parts of the world, not only Africa, but in safaris in India and South America, and so it developed from there. And I've been lucky enough to get fairly proficient at it.
Oh. So this is your 5th book together?
This is our 5th book together. It's our 4th book that we've done exclusively together, but Gerald's first book was the book on leopard, which he was halfway through when he came to Mala Mala, and came to Mala Mala to complete it. And so I just helped him with a little bit of the scientific writing in that book. And then while we were doing that, we decided to do our first book together, which was called An African Experience, which is very much just about the experiences and the time that we spent together at Mala Mala working on the leopard book.
Now, this particular book, did you actually shoot it together? It took a number of years.
We did the Big Five. It was our last book 15 years ago.
Okay.
And this book, Gerald started working on about 5 years ago.
I had more or less sort of, I was so busy playing golf and enjoying my life that I didn't do anything for a number of years. And 5 years ago, I suddenly said, you know what, I really enjoy doing books. It's something, it's a passion of mine. It gives South Africa a bit of publicity. It gives wildlife and conservation a bit of publicity. So let me do another book. And I started with Living the Dream and went through various processes. And about 2 years ago, I got hold of Heinrich, and I said to him, by that time sort of faded from the wildlife photography scene. And I said to Heinrich, would you like to do a book for me? He said, for you, Gerald? Yes, with pleasure. I thought, wow, that's great. And I eventually found out that one of my books called Timeless Wilderness was one of his inspirations in life.
Wow.
So it was quite nice. And then, of course, we had to start work in earnest, because the boom bang straight portrait photography was over for books. You need the modern style. You need to do the modern, high-quality digital work.
And he called me when he was kind of well into the process and said, look, I've got all these ideas. I don't know where to go with it. And so we put our heads together. And we've always been a great team, and we always bounce off each other and inspire each other. So we didn't spend a lot of time together in the bush on this book together. We did it separately and had a couple of trips together, but we decided that we had to get some fresh new photography, and so we didn't just rely on what we'd done before. And our publisher, Heinrich van den Berg, had very stringent requirements for the quality of the photography, and all digital. Mm-hmm. So we'd come through from the old days of slide photography and gradually kicking and screaming away from slides into digital to realize what a great medium it is. And so Gerald in particular really ramped up his technical photography and did quite a lot of remote stuff, quite a lot of long exposure, but also just changed it slightly from being just portrait type photography to animals in their environment, because that's what we wanted the feel of the book to be.
So the work started all over again, and I was then, unfortunately, starting to get lame in my legs and my arms. So I come along Wayne, my son, who had worked here at Maasai Mara for a couple of years and they'd made some movies in the bush and so forth. And he came along to help me carry the goods and chattels, and we went about trying to capture more of the essence of the bush than just the animals, and different angles and remote photography and the things that were necessary, and night long exposure photography and stuff like that, so that we could include that all in the book to make the book more modern.
Now the remote photography, there are exquisite photographs in here where it looks as if you are really on top of them. So,
Yes.
and were you in a hide, or
Yes.
how did you manage to do
Yes,
that?
some of that is from a hide, where we actually put the camera next to the water, and then
Yeah, because these low-angle shots that over the
Yes.
water with the silhouettes of the
Yes.
mirror images of the animals, and then absolutely
so
fantastic.
we sat in the heights for a long time, but I did quite a lot of it here at Maasai Mara as well, where we would get out and place the camera if we saw a herd of elephants coming down, because of the expertise of the game rangers here. They know where the animals will come and drink, and where to place the camera, so we used their expertise as well. And we would place the camera in just hopes that Ellie didn't stand on a 100 or nearly 200,000 rands worth of equipment lying in the sand, and then remotely take the photographs. That's why we got those special angles, that it feels as if you actually are touching the animal.
And the patience you need to get that shot.
Oh, that comes over time. We don't even think about it anymore, except my wife. She doesn't like to come to the bush when I'm photographing because of the long hours we do sit. But for me, it's all in a day's work.
And how has your writing evolved since the early days?
It's interesting because a lot of the stuff that we've done is anecdotal. So and my background is in scientific writing, and also when Gerald and I made movies, we made made about 18, 19 movies for international distribution. I did all the writing of the script, so it's very much a storytelling thing. And I think it's evolved, to answer your question, how my writing has evolved. I think it's evolved from being very much just concentrating on facts and figures and dry scientific writing, which was the norm in the old days. For example, our first movie that we did was called Royal Blood, and it was about a pride of lions, two different prides of lions, one in Botswana and one in the Kruger. And in those days, it was very frowned upon, for example, to name animals. In the scientific community, anyway, you would never say that. You would say the female lion is walking. But we knew these animals. I mean, they were one of the lions we'd been following for 8 years, and so we knew her very, very well. And we tried to tell the story as you would, in a kid's storybook or something like that. So we named the animals and we talked about their lives. And I think that was a changing point for me, because it gave me license to get away from the stodgy old scientific writing to writing about these animals and their characters. And they are. I mean, these are all different individuals and they have different ways of doing things. And yeah, so it kind of evolved from there, I think.
So the writing in this book as well is very enticing. It makes you want to read, and that was the purpose behind the writing for this book.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, it was. And, I think in Africa we're all storytellers, sitting around a fire and listening to, and I've been lucky enough to have some of my best friends be some of the best storytellers in Africa. And, I've been inspired by people like my old mate Dave Rattray, who, tells the story of the Anglo-Zulu War. And he was always, an inspiration to me, because it was spellbinding. And, sitting around campfires throughout Africa, you meet all these characters and you realize how important the story is. And in every culture in Africa, the story is the important part. And we're very patient as Africans to listen to stories, and people aren't these days. People need, okay, what's the story? 2 minutes must be done, whereas we like to spin this long yarn. So, yeah, I think that's important.
After the break, we talk about Gerald and Will's adventures in East Africa, specifically the Maasai Mara, as well as their adventures in capturing photographs of the Big Five and the Big Seven. Will Taylor writes in the book, "Even after many years of guiding, filming and photographing in the African bush, it remains exciting to start out early in the morning and then find tracks and decipher what has been happening in the night, when the dew is still damp on the grass and the game trails, and the fresh pug mark of a leopard stands out in the slanting dawn light. Excitement rises in one's body, and those primal feelings rise up from places deep within. There is nothing quite like it." You also visited the Maasai Mara
Yes.
for this book. Tell me a little bit about that, because there's some stunning photographs that could only have been taken there.
Yes. So, you know, that part of Kenya, the Maasai Mara and the Mara Triangle in particular, and then northern Tanzania, we've spent quite a lot of time in that area. But it is, the Mara Triangle is, again, like Mala Mala, it's one of the most amazing, wildlife areas. One, it's got great physical beauty. It's very different to the bushveld that we're used to as South Africans. It's the very open plains dotted with acacia trees and termite mounds, and it's aesthetically very pleasing as a backdrop to whatever animal you find. But the game viewing is unbelievable, because it doesn't just rely on the migration. There's other parts of the Serengeti ecosystem, and that's what people don't realize, is the Mara is actually the very northern tip of the Serengeti ecosystem. The vast majority of the Serengeti is in Tanzania. But there are parts of that area that, unless the migration's there, there's nothing there. Not true of the Maasai Mara. The Maasai Mara has resident game populations that are amazing. So I encourage anyone who hasn't been there, who's a bush lover, to go up to that part of the world, because it's very special.
I've done a lot of work in Kenya, in the Maasai Mara, Tanzania. I've done plenty of work in Botswana. I worked on the Savuti Marsh with the Pride Alliance for 8 years, so I got to know the lions pretty well. I worked in the Kruger Park. I pretty much worked all over the place, but my highlights are Mala Mala Game Reserve, the Maasai Mara in Kenya, the Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater is a special place, but very expensive and rather overcrowded now. Mala Mala has been my highlight, and I found the ease of working here has just been the best, and the ease of getting here. You know, it's I live in Benoni, so it's 5 hours from here, so it's easy to get here.
The big five that have traditionally attracted first big game hunters and then international tourists on photographic safaris are lion, leopard, elephant, rhino and buffalo. Now, with the big seven, Will and Gerald have added two more important and endangered species, the wild dog and the cheetah.
So we, we've always felt that the designation of these animals is arbitrary. Like the big five were originally because they're the five most sought after trophy animals and probably the most dangerous animals to hunt in Africa. And so the big five was always an important thing to people coming to Africa. I want to go to a big five reserve. And it is important. It's important to see those iconic animals. And as things evolved, Gerald and I, in particular, the two other favorite animals that we had were cheetah and wild dog. They naturally were to us an addition to the big five. So if we were going on an expedition, a photographic expedition, those were pretty much the seven animals that we wanted to see and photograph, because of the excitement factor, because of the rarity factor, and particularly with cheetah and wild dog, both being diurnal predators, both being exciting diurnal predators. One hunts by speed, one hunts by speed over a long period of time, running down their prey, and that they're just very obvious and easy to photograph because they are out there during the day. Whereas a lot of these other animals are, the other predators in particular, are a bit more skulking and harder to get good shots of. So the seven just came together. In fact, at Mala Mala, many years ago, they introduced a thing called the Mala Mala 7, which is, if you saw all seven animals, you got this cool little certificate. And so, it just naturally became the big seven. And we went through a lot of iterations of what we were going to call the book. And eventually, after, I struggled a little bit with this, but eventually we said, well, why not? We've done the big five, and it's still a book that's selling on the shelves and throughout Africa.
I have a passion for leopards. I've worked extensively on leopards, so yes. My passion as a youngster grew up with lions. So I had this great passion for lions. Now, a friend of mine calls them ugly hyenas, or good-looking hyenas, but I have a real passion for lions and leopard. But yeah, certainly, I would say that the big seven, we've done the big seven, we've added cheetah and wild dog. We've done that because those are the iconic species. And we know that when the tourists come to Africa, those are the 7 animals that are first on their want list. And the cheetah and wild dog are probably the most difficult of the 7 to photograph, because they're rather endangered and rare. But I specifically found the pack of wild dogs that I could actually walk with and lie with and take photographs and be with them sort of constantly while they were moving around on foot. So that was good. And cheetah, I've always had a passion for cheetah. So in the Maasai Mara and areas like that, I really found cheetah good. I've done a lot of work in Namibia, where cheetah is quite good, and that's where the cover photograph was taken, in Namibia.
So you talk about on foot. So do you go out of vehicle a lot, and can it be dangerous?
Yes, we do quite a lot of trekking, especially here at Maasai Mara. We weren't allowed to do it in most of the other places, but at Maasai Mara we found a lot of, especially my first 7 months here as a greenhorn motor car salesman. I learned, I had a tracker that wasn't really a tracker, you just worked here, but he knew the bush quite well. A chap by the name of Hendrik, and we used to go trekking. He was quite an interesting fellow because his brother was killed by lions, as a matter of fact. So every time we were tracking leopard and lion spoor crossed the leopard spoor, he would say, "Stop, I'm not going any further, you go on your own." No, so he didn't like lions. And we had a couple of little hairy, scary moments. Over time one gets to know the animals' habits and natures, and to read them, and to know when they're aggressive and when you should back off, and when they are comfortable in your presence.
What are your expectations for the book?
My expectations for the book, I want people to pick up this book, and when they put it down, and please read the book because it's just so well written, and put it down and say, I've been on a game drive and I've seen the big 7 on the game drive. So I'm very privileged to have seen the big 7 in one game drive. I want them to get the ambience, the feeling of the bush, not only the animals. I want them to feel that they are in the world, 3D world of Mala or whatever area the picture was taken in.
Last night you said you are now 75 and
75,
you are ready to do another book.
Well, I suddenly realized, working with Heinrich through HBH Publishing, that I really have a passion for doing books, and he does them so beautifully. And everything, technology has moved on so quickly and so beautifully, and books are now. I know people are saying books are obsolete because of the new technologies and because of the internet and so forth, but I believe there's going to always be a place for a book on your shelf. There's nothing like opening a new book and smelling a new book and seeing a new book. And if you miss something, turn back the page. And you know, I still believe there's nothing like a book. And because of having done this book, I thought, well, at 75, you know, maybe I can just put my feet up. I'm not going to. I really want to do, if my injuries or my neck comes right and things like that, I certainly will do another book.
The book, will it be distributed only in South Africa or throughout the continent?
It's throughout the continent, and then you know, eventually I think it'll find its way online and be available all around the world. I live part of my life in America, and so I have quite a few copies of the book over there that we are distributing over there to friends and clients, and it's available on our website over there as well, which makes it easy. So yeah, ultimately, Heinrich's going to distribute it throughout the continent, but it'll mostly be in South Africa.
And the book was The Big Seven, Adventures in Search of Africa's Iconic Species. Thanks for watching Talking Books, and I'll see you again soon.